When Huawei first rolled out commercial 5G networks 6 years ago, the world watched with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. This wasn't just another incremental upgrade in mobile technology. It represented a quantum leap forward. With blazing speeds that could download entire movies in seconds, latency so low it felt instantaneous, and the capacity to connect millions of devices simultaneously, 5G promised to reshape how we live, work, and communicate. The response was overwhelming. Countries across the globe clamored for access to this transformative technology. Recognizing the enormous potential and the pressing demand, Huawei embarked on an ambitious worldwide initiative, deploying 5G infrastructure on a scale never before attempted. Today, spanning more than 130 nations and territories, millions of Huawei's 5G base stations pulse with data, forming an invisible network that connects billions of people. But Huawei's engineers weren't satisfied with merely connecting cities and suburbs. They had their sights set on something far more audacious, a location so remote, so hostile, that the mere suggestion seemed absurd to industry observers. When news broke that Huawei planned to invest $800,000 to erect 12 5G base stations on the slopes of Mount Everest, the announcement was met with ridicule, particularly from American engineering circles. Critics dismissed it as a publicity stunt, a wasteful vanity project that defied both logic and economics. Yet behind this seemingly quixotic endeavor lay strategic thinking that would ultimately silence the skeptics and demonstrate China's technological prowess in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable story, I invite you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're about to explore one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements of our time. The mountain that touches the sky. Straddling the border between China and Nepal, Mount Everest rises 8,848 meters into the thin stratosphere. Known to Tibetans as Chomolungma and to Nepalists as Sagarmatha, it has captivated human imagination for centuries. To stand at its summit is to touch the literal roof of our planet, a place where Earth meets sky in the most primal sense. But this majestic peak is also a killer. The statistics tell a sobering story. Year-round temperatures hover around -20 degrees Celsius, and during the brutal winter months, thermometers plunge to -60. As you ascend, each step takes you into increasingly oxygen-starved air. The human body, evolved for sea-level existence, begins to break down in these conditions. Climbers experience debilitating altitude sickness. Their judgment becomes impaired, and their bodies literally begin dying cell by cell. The mountain claims lives with disturbing regularity. Avalanches thunder down without warning. Sudden blizzards can reduce visibility to 0 in seconds. Climbers lose fingers and toes to frostbite. Some simply sit down to rest and never stand again, their bodies remaining on the mountain as grim markers for those who follow. These frozen corpses, preserved by the extreme cold, serve as waypoints along established routes, a testament to Everest's unforgiving nature. Yet paradoxically, this same danger draws people from every corner of the globe. The mountain represents the ultimate test of human endurance and will. For scientists, it's a natural laboratory offering insights into everything from high-altitude medicine to climate change. For adventurers, it's the final frontier, the one place on Earth that still demands everything you have and offers no guarantees in return. The dream that sparked controversy. In 2019, engineers at Huawei's headquarters proposed something that seemed to border on madness: blanket Mount Everest with 5G coverage. Not just the base camps where trekkers acclimate, the entire climbing route all the way to the summit. Approximately 12 base stations strategically positioned to ensure that every section of the ascent would have access to high-speed wireless connectivity. If successful, this isolated and deadly environment, where perhaps a few hundred people venture each year, would boast better mobile coverage than many populated cities. Climbers could stream live video from the death zone. Rescue teams could coordinate with crystal-clear video calls. Scientists could transmit real-time data from their high-altitude experiments. The Western engineering community's response was swift and derisive. "The Chinese are hallucinating," scoffed one prominent American telecommunications engineer at an industry conference. "This is fantasy masquerading as innovation." The criticism wasn't entirely unfounded. After all, the project seemed to violate every principle of rational infrastructure investment. Consider the numbers. Each year, roughly 500 seasoned mountaineers attempt Everest, but fewer than 1 in 5 actually reaches the summit. The success rate has improved with modern equipment and forecasting, but the mountain's reputation as one of Earth's most dangerous places remains well-earned. The infamous death zone above 8,000 meters contains just 1/3 the oxygen available at sea level. At this altitude, the human body cannot acclimatize. It can only deteriorate. Every moment spent here brings you closer to permanent damage or death. For Huawei's construction teams, these conditions presented unprecedented engineering challenges. A single telecommunications unit weighs dozens of kilograms. Add the necessary fiber optic cables, measured in kilometers, along with backup generators, solar panels, and support equipment, and you're looking at roughly 8 tons of gear that somehow needed to be hauled up the mountain. There are no roads, no helicopters that can reliably operate at these altitudes, no easy solutions. It would have to be done the old-fashioned way, on the backs of humans and yaks, one agonizing step at a time. The impossible logistics. Above 6,500 meters, Mount Everest becomes an alien world. Perpetual ice and snow cover everything. The landscape shifts constantly as glaciers creep, ice falls collapse, and avalanches rewrite the terrain overnight. Any structure built here must contend with these forces while also withstanding hurricane-force winds and temperatures that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. Huawei's engineering team ran preliminary calculations. If they could establish a base station at 5,500 meters in a relatively flat area and position another at 6,500 meters, theoretical models suggested they could achieve continuous 5G coverage. But theory and reality are very different things on Everest. Weather patterns can change in heartbeats. What appears solid one day might be gone the next. Equipment that functions flawlessly at sea level can fail catastrophically in the extreme cold and low pressure. Then there was the economic argument, which seemed insurmountable. Even by generous estimates, fewer than 700 people visit the Everest region annually. Of these, only 400 to 500 actually attempt the climb, and their visits are measured in weeks, not months. There's no permanent population to serve, no ongoing revenue stream to justify the massive investment. In pure business terms, building 5G infrastructure here made about as much sense as opening a luxury hotel on Mars. Traditional telecom deployment follows a simple formula build where there are customers. Every base station requires ongoing maintenance, power, and operational oversight. The return on investment is calculated by user density and usage patterns. By every conventional metric, Everest failed the test. The cost per user would be astronomical, the maintenance challenges nearly impossible, and the actual usage, even in the best-case scenario, would be negligible. Critics pointed to dozens of other locations where the same resources could connect thousands, even millions of people. Rural villages throughout developing nations still lacked basic 3G coverage. Urban centers in Africa and Southeast Asia desperately needed infrastructure upgrades. Why pour resources into a frozen wasteland when so many underserved communities existed? The human cost of isolation. But Huawei's leadership saw something the balance sheets couldn't capture: human lives hanging in the balance. For decades, Everest had been a communication black hole. Before the year 2000, the only way to communicate from the mountain was through expensive satellite phones with limited coverage and reliability. Even these often failed in bad weather or at extreme altitudes. When things went wrong on Everest, and they often did, climbers found themselves utterly alone. A twisted ankle at 7,000 meters could become a death sentence. Running low on oxygen with a storm approaching meant making desperate life-or-death calculations with no ability to consult weather updates or call for help. Climbing teams sometimes lost track of their members, searching blindly through whiteout conditions. The mountain's history is filled with heartbreaking tales of isolation. Climbers who knew rescue was impossible, who could see their base camp miles below, but had no way to communicate their distress. Families who waited days or weeks to learn whether their loved ones had survived. Rescue coordinators making decisions based on hours-old information relayed through unreliable channels. This was the problem Huawei saw, not a business opportunity, but a humanitarian imperative. In an age where a person in the heart of Manhattan could stream high-definition video while walking down the street, climbers facing life-threatening emergencies on the world's most famous mountain were using communication technology from the 1990s, turning vision into reality. Undeterred by mockery and unfazed by the technical challenges, Huawei's engineers began their assault on Everest, not as climbers, but as builders. The first step was finding a suitable testing ground. They needed a location that could simulate Everest's conditions, but with easier access for repeated experiments. After an exhaustive search across China's high-altitude regions, they settled on a site near Lhasa, the Tibetan capital, which sits at 3,650 meters above sea level. Here, they could test equipment durability, signal propagation in thin air, and power systems under extreme cold, all while remaining within a few hours' drive of major cities. Teams ran hundreds of trials, pushing equipment to its limits, identifying failure points, and iterating on solutions. They tested different mounting systems, experimented with various power configurations, and developed specialized weatherproofing techniques. Once they had refined their approach, the real work began. The fiber optic cables presented an immediate challenge. To withstand Everest's conditions, each cable needed to be encased in heavy-duty protective shielding, armor against the cold, wind, and physical stress. Each spool measured an incredible 3,000 meters in length and weighed 1.4 tons. Under normal circumstances, these cables would be transported by truck and installed using machinery. On Everest, there would be no trucks, no cranes, no mechanical assistance of any kind. The solution was as simple as it was grueling human chains. Huawei assembled teams of 40 workers, each member responsible for a specific section of cable. They unspooled the massive coils and, like ancient builders moving monolithic stones, carried the cable length by length up the mountain trails. Picture 40 people, spread across a mountainside, each holding a section of a single continuous cable, moving in synchronized steps to avoid tangling or damage. For several days, this human chain inched its way up Everest, eventually delivering all 25,000 meters of fiber optic cable to the installation sites. The engineer's crucible. But delivering the cable was only the beginning. At these altitudes, in temperatures that regularly dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius, the armored exterior of the cables held firm, but the delicate optical fibers inside could freeze and fracture. When this happened, technicians faced a task that would challenge the steadiest hands under the best conditions. They had to locate the breakpoint, often not visible to the naked eye. Then, using specialized tools, they had to carefully cut through the protective armor without damaging the surrounding cable. Once exposed, the broken fiber ends needed to be precisely trimmed and cleaned. Finally came the most delicate operation, fusion splicing, where the two fiber ends are aligned with micrometer precision and melted together using a specialized tool, creating a seamless joint that allows light to pass through uninterrupted. In a temperature-controlled laboratory, this is standard procedure. On Mount Everest, in sub-zero temperatures, with howling winds and oxygen-deprived air, it became a test of human endurance and skill. The thick gloves that prevented frostbite made precision work impossible. So, engineers developed a dangerous rhythm. Remove the heavy gloves, don thin ones that allowed finger dexterity, work frantically for 10 to 15 minutes, then replace the heavy gloves before frostbite set in. Some days, a single splice took hours to complete as engineers rotated through these cycles, fighting against both the cold and their body's desperate need for oxygen. Hundreds of Huawei technicians rotated through the project over nearly 2 years. They worked in shifts, acclimatizing slowly to prevent altitude sickness, then pushing forward when weather windows opened. They dealt with equipment failures, supply chain challenges, and the constant danger of the mountain itself. Several team members suffered frostbite. Others had to be evacuated due to altitude-related illnesses, but they persisted. Finally, in the year 2020, the network came online. 12 base stations now dotted the landscape, multiple installations at the base camp, situated at 5,300 meters, where most climbing expeditions begin their serious preparations. Additional stations at the transition camp at 5,800 meters, where teams acclimate and prepare for the final push. And, the crown jewels. Stations at the forward camp at 6,500 meters, positioned squarely in what climbers call the death zone. Each base station had cost approximately $65,000 to install, not counting the years of research and development, the testing phase, or the operational costs that would follow. The total investment exceeded $800,000 for a network that, by conventional business standards, would never turn a profit. Yet when tested in 2023, the results silenced even the harshest critics. At 6,500 meters, an altitude where many climbers struggle to think clearly, where simply staying alive requires constant vigilance, the 5G network delivered download speeds exceeding 1.7 gigabits per second. Upload speeds reached 215 megabits per second. These aren't just impressive numbers. They're speeds that many urban centers around the world would honestly envy. What does this mean practically? A climber at 6,500 meters can now broadcast 4K high-definition video in real time. Scientists can upload massive data sets from their research stations without delay. Most crucially, rescue coordinators can video conference with climbers in distress, assessing injuries, providing medical guidance, and coordinating evacuation efforts with unprecedented precision. The communications darkness that had cloaked Everest for all of human history had been lifted. While the world marveled at connectivity on the roof of the world, Chinese telecommunications companies were already pursuing an equally ambitious project in the opposite direction, downward into the Earth's depths. China Mobile, partnering with the Yangmei Group and Huawei, embarked on creating the nation's first fully intelligent coal mine. Located in Shanxi Province, China's coal heartland, this facility would push 5G technology to its limits in an entirely different extreme environment. Instead of thin air and bitter cold, engineers now faced dense rock and crushing depths. The network they built extends 534 meters below the surface, the deepest underground 5G deployment in China and among the deepest in the world. This wasn't simply about installing base stations in a mine, it was about, reimagining what mining could be in the 21st century. The infrastructure deployed here represents cutting-edge telecommunications engineering. The network provides dedicated ultra-gigabit uplink capacity, meaning it can simultaneously transmit more than 50 4K high-definition video streams from deep underground to surface control centers. This bandwidth enables something that seemed like science fiction just a few years ago, completely automated and unmanned mining operations. Imagine a coal mine where humans rarely need to descend into the dangerous depths, where heavy machinery is controlled remotely by operators sitting in comfortable, well-lit control rooms on the surface, where artificial intelligence systems monitor air quality, structural stability, and equipment performance in real time, alerting supervisors to potential issues before they become crises. The implications of this technology extend far beyond convenience. Mining has always been one of humanity's most dangerous occupations. Cave-ins, explosions, Gas leaks and equipment failures claim lives regularly. Coal mining, in particular, has a grim history written in tragedy. By removing humans from the most hazardous environments, 5G-enabled automation saves lives. The system enables what engineers call unmanned, automated, and visualized operations. Every piece of machinery, every tunnel section, every ventilation system is monitored and controlled through the 5G network. Massive boring machines carve through rock while operators watch from above, making precise adjustments through controls that honestly feel more like video game interfaces than traditional industrial equipment. The reduction in physical cabling represents another breakthrough. Traditional mining operations require miles of physical cables for power, communication, and control systems. These cables must be laid, maintained, and frequently replaced as machinery moves and tunnels extend. They're vulnerable to damage, time-consuming to repair, and represent significant operational costs. With 5G's wireless connectivity, much of this infrastructure becomes unnecessary. Equipment can be relocated in hours instead of days. Maintenance becomes simpler and safer. Perhaps most remarkably, the system dramatically reduces labor intensity. Workers who once spent long shifts in cramped, dangerous spaces underground now operate equipment remotely. Physical strain decreases, exposure to hazards diminishes, and productivity increases. It's the rare situation where business efficiency and worker safety align perfectly. The scale of ambition here is, well, truly remarkable. China's major telecommunications providers haven't stopped with just a single demonstration project. Across 22 open-pit mining operations, smart mine initiatives are now underway or already operational. These projects are really accelerating the implementation of intelligent coal extraction, automated inspection systems, and AI-driven dispatch operations that optimize production in real time. The pattern is clear. China isn't just experimenting with 5G in extreme environments. It's systematically deploying it wherever the technology can solve real problems or, create new possibilities. From 8,848 meters above sea level to 534 meters below ground, Chinese 5G networks now operate across a vertical range of over 9,300 meters, nearly the depth of the deepest ocean trenches. This achievement speaks to something deeper than just technological capability. It reflects a national commitment to pursuing projects that other nations might deem impractical or economically unjustifiable. While critics focus on short-term return on investment, Chinese planners think in terms of technological sovereignty, strategic positioning, and long-term capabilities. The philosophy of impossible projects is really taking shape in China's approach to technological infrastructure. There's a pattern emerging here. Time and again, Chinese companies and institutions tackle projects that, on paper, seem to make little sense. They build high-speed rail lines through nearly impassable mountain terrain. They construct massive hydroelectric dams that require relocating entire cities. They land rovers on the far side of the moon and even bring back samples from asteroids. Each project draws skepticism, often even mockery, from international observers who question the economics or doubt the technical feasibility. And each time, Chinese engineers respond not with words, but, with results. The skeptics fall silent as the impossible becomes reality. This approach stems from a different calculus than Western infrastructure planning typically employs. Rather than asking, what's the immediate return on investment? Chinese planners ask, what capabilities will we gain, and what will we learn from attempting this? The Mount Everest 5G network may never be profitable in a traditional sense, but it demonstrated to the world, and perhaps more importantly, to China's own engineers and citizens, that Chinese technology could function anywhere, under any conditions. It provided a testing ground for equipment, techniques, and system designs that will prove valuable in countless other applications. It generated global publicity worth far more than $800,000 in advertising. And yes, it has saved lives and will save more in the years to come. The broader implications of these efforts are, honestly, pretty profound. The smart mine deployment follows similar logic. China remains heavily dependent on coal for its energy needs, despite ambitious renewable energy programs. Mining safely and efficiently isn't just an economic issue, it's a matter of energy security and social stability. By pioneering automated mining technology, China develops intellectual property, builds expertise, and creates systems that can be exported to other nations facing similar challenges. These projects also serve as forcing functions for innovation. When you tell engineers they must make 5G work at minus 40 degrees Celsius or 534 meters underground, they develop solutions to problems that haven't yet emerged in mainstream applications. The weatherproofing techniques developed for Everest inform designs for equipment deployed in Arctic regions. The signal propagation methods refined in deep mines help optimize urban deployments where signals must penetrate dense concrete and steel structures. There's also a psychological dimension here. Major engineering achievements inspire national pride and international respect. They attract talented young people to technical fields. They demonstrate governmental competence and ambition. The images of 5G base stations on Everest, like the images of Chinese astronauts in space or Chinese-built high-speed trains, become symbols of a nation that can accomplish anything it sets its mind to. The transformation of impossible to inevitable is, really striking when you look back. When China announced plans for the world's largest high-speed rail network, skeptics questioned whether the technology would work at Chinese scales and in Chinese geography. Today, China operates 2/3 of all high-speed rail track on Earth, and its systems are considered among the most reliable and advanced.